The night had a strange stillness, the kind that wrapped itself around Mama Elise's small wooden home like a shawl woven from silence. At 82, she had grown used to nights like this, quiet, lonely, and echoing with memories that refused to fade. The breeze touched the curtains lightly, like a polite visitor who didn't wish to disturb. But inside her heart, a storm had been waiting for 40 long years. Her old hands trembled slightly as she arranged her evening tea on the table. She had performed this ritual thousands of times, but tonight felt different. The air carried a weight, as if something unfinished was finally making its way toward her doorstep. The house stood like a museum of her past. The walls were lined with stories she never told, rooms filled with objects she could not throw away. Every little item carried a memory, and every memory led back to one man, a man whose name she hadn't spoken aloud since the night he disappeared. Her children believed she lived peacefully. They saw a strong woman who raised them, loved them, taught them kindness. What they didn't see was the shadow she carried, the shadow of someone she once waited for under moonlit nights, clutching a promise that never returned. Tonight, she felt her heart beating differently, like it was preparing itself for something final. She sat by her window, watching the village street. Very few people walked by at this hour. The lamplight flickered. A dog barked in the distance. Everything felt like a slow-motion film where she was both the actor and the audience. She whispered to herself, 40 years, and still I wait. Her voice cracked on the last word. She rarely allowed herself to speak such truth. She had never remarried after her husband died. Not because she was still loyal to him, though she respected him deeply, but because she had no space left in her heart. A part of her soul remained frozen in time, on a night when the rain fell in furious sheets, and the man she loved walked away without turning back. She didn't know that tonight, the past would finally come home. Outside her door, unseen by her, a small white envelope lay half hidden under the edge of the doormat. The postman had dropped it only minutes earlier, unaware of the story sealed inside. The ink on the envelope had faded, as though it had traveled a long way through time itself. Inside the envelope was the last piece of her life's puzzle. But Mama Elise did not know that yet. She only knew one thing deep in her bones. Tonight would not be like any other night. Mama Elise rose slowly from her chair, her joints whispering complaints the way old furniture does after decades of service. She walked toward the small wooden drawer tucked beneath the staircase, an ordinary drawer to anyone else, but to her, it was the guardian of her heart's deepest secret. Her fingers hovered above the handle for a moment. Every time she opened it, her breath tightened, as if the past still had the power to bruise her ribs. She pulled the drawer gently, and inside, wrapped in a cloth she had sewn in her youth, lay the object that had survived every loss, every season, every storm. A single photograph. She lifted it with trembling hands, and the cloth slipped away, revealing the faded edges and yellowing corners. The man in the picture smiled with a softness that once made her feel safe enough to dream. His eyes held a promise she once believed would last a lifetime. She touched his face lightly, tracing the outline as though afraid he might disappear a second time. His name was Jonah. A name she hadn't spoken aloud since the night he walked into the storm. The photograph had been taken on the day they made their secret vow, under a mango tree, long before responsibilities hardened their lives. She had worn a simple dress, and Jonah had placed a small flower behind her ear, laughing at how shy she became. The camera captured that small, innocent moment. A moment she held on to long after everything else faded. Her children had never seen this picture. Even her late husband, Bernard, never knew Jonah existed. She had kept this hidden not because she wanted to lie, but because some wounds are too deep to show, and some loves too sacred to explain. How could she tell anyone that the truest part of her heart lived in a memory she never dared revisit? She stared at the photograph, and for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to whisper his name. Jonah, why didn't you come back? Her voice cracked on the question she had carried for 40 years. A question she buried under responsibilities, motherhood, aging, but never truly let go. The room around her blurred as her eyes filled with tears. She blinked hard, forcing the haze away. She wanted to see him clearly, just once more, before time closed its hands around her fading life. A soft knock outside startled her. She turned her head, but no one was there. The wind had nudged the door. Or perhaps the past was trying to enter. She set the photograph gently on the table beside her teacup. For a long time, she simply sat, holding her arms around herself as if comforting a younger version of her heart. She didn't know that the envelope waiting silently under her door, still untouched, still unclaimed, held the answer to her whispered question. A letter written by the same man in the photograph. A letter that had traveled through decades to reach her on this final night. Soon, it would change everything she believed about love, loss, and betrayal. The photograph lay on the table like an open wound, and as Mama Elise stared at it, the memories began to pull her backward. Slowly at first, then suddenly, like a wave determined to drag her into its depths. Her breath grew shallow. Her fingers curled tightly around her shawl. And in her mind, the quiet present dissolved into the roar of a storm that had swallowed her world 40 years ago. It was a night much like this one. Heavy air, uneasy silence, a feeling that something unseen was preparing to break. But back then she was young, full of restless hope and trembling dreams. Jonah had come to her door drenched, the rain dripping from his hair. His shirt clinging to his breathless chest. "Elise, I need to talk to you," he had said, his voice trembling, not with fear of the storm outside, but with something far deeper. She remembered the way her heart raced. She remembered the way she reached for his hand. But Jonah didn't take it. That was how she knew something was terribly wrong. They walked together toward the mango tree, the same place where their photograph had been taken, the place where they promised each other a future. But that night, the sky cracked with thunder as if trying to warn them that promises made under sunlight do not always survive the storms of fate. "Elise, you have to trust me," Jonah said, his voice almost drowned by the wind. She nodded, though fear coiled inside her like a tightening rope. "I love you," he whispered, words she had waited so long to hear. But the way he said them felt like a goodbye. She grabbed his arm. "Then stay. Stay with me, Jonah. Don't walk away. Not tonight." His eyes glistened, eyes she would memorize for the rest of her life. "If I stay," he said softly, "you might lose everything. And I can't let that happen to you." She didn't understand. How could she? She was young, and love had painted the world too beautifully for her to imagine danger lurking beneath it. "Tell me what's going on," she begged. But Jonah only cupped her face, his palms warm even in the freezing rain. "I will come back for you," he whispered. "Promise." Wow. A lifeline she would cling to for decades. Then, with a final trembling kiss on her forehead, he stepped back, one step, then another, tears mixing with rain until he finally turned away. She ran after him, calling his name into the storm. But he didn't look back. Not once. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the soil. Jonah's figure blurred into the darkness. And just like that, he vanished. For weeks Elise searched. For months she waited. For years she clung to hope that someday he would appear at her door, drenched again in rain but ready to explain everything. But no one came. No message. No word. No body. Just silence. A silence that stayed with her for 40 years, settling into her bones like winter. On her chair in the present moment, Mama Elise wiped her tears slowly. She didn't know that the truth about that night, the real reason Jonah walked into the storm, was about to enter her life again, quietly, sealed in a fading envelope still lying under her door. A truth that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about love, abandonment, and destiny. Time has a cruel way of moving forward even when the heart stays behind. For Mama Elise, the years after Jonah disappeared were not years lived. They were years survived. After the stormy night he vanished, she waited for days with sleepless eyes, then weeks with trembling hope, then months with fading breath. Each morning she would sit by her window, pretending to embroider while her eyes scanned the road for a familiar silhouette. Each evening she waited by the mango tree, convincing herself that maybe Jonah would return at the same place he left her. But seasons passed. And with every season, hope peeled away like old paint on forgotten walls. Her parents, worried about her shrinking spirit, urged her to reconsider her future. Society whispered behind her back, cruel whispers, calling her the girl who still waited for a ghost. And little by little, the world pushed her to move on. Then came Bernard. He was a good man, steady, honest, gentle in the way a river is gentle after a storm. He approached her heart the way a respectful visitor approaches a temple, softly, never forcing entry. Elise liked his kindness. She valued his presence. But she could not love him the way she once loved Jonah. Still she married him. Not out of passion, but out of exhaustion. Exhaustion from waiting, from hoping, from holding a hollow future that never arrived. She convinced herself that love could grow the way vines grow on old houses. Slowly, quietly. And for a time it worked. She built a family with Bernard. She raised children who adored her warmth and admired her strength. She became the heart of a home filled with laughter, birthdays, and ordinary joys. But even in those happy moments, on quiet nights when her children slept and her husband's breathing softened beside her, she would open that small wooden drawer, take out Jonah's photograph, and wonder, where was he? Was he alive? Did he ever think of her? Or had she been nothing more than a passing dream in his life, a name washed away by rain? Bernard once found her crying quietly in the kitchen. He held her, believing her tears were caused by exhaustion, by motherhood, by life's burdens. She let him believe that. She never had the heart to tell him the truth, that some tears fall not from pain, but from memories that refuse to rest. As the years turned into decades, Elise built a life that looked full from the outside. Her children grew into responsible adults. Bernard passed away quietly after a long illness, leaving her with gentle memories and no regrets. But beneath the surface of her calm smile, a small corner of her heart remained untouched, a corner lit only by Jonah's fading photograph. She aged gracefully, but her eyes carried a permanent softness, the softness of someone who once loved fiercely and lost silently. Her laughter was warm, but her silences were deeper than anyone around her understood. Everyone believed Mama Elise lived a complete life. But they did not know the truth. Her entire life had been shaped by waiting for a man who vanished into a storm, and waiting for an answer that never came. Not until tonight. 'Cause tonight, a forgotten envelope rested under her door, inches away from changing the ending of her story. Night deepened around Mama Elise's house, settling into the corners like an old friend. The air grew heavier, the silence thicker, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Elise sat in her chair with Jonah's photograph beside her cup, unaware that fate had already placed its hand on her door. Outside, a soft rustle stirred the air, a passing breeze or perhaps destiny's quiet steps. The envelope at her doorstep shifted slightly, as though urging her to notice it. But she remained lost in thought, staring at the photograph until her eyes blurred again. Then came a knock. Soft, hesitant tap. Her heart stumbled. This hour. Who could it be? She reached for her cane and slowly made her way to the door. Her bones protested with every step, but something urged her forward. A strange pull, like a whisper threading through the night. She opened the door. No one was there. Only the wind breathed across the empty street. She frowned gently, about to close the door, when her eyes fell on the corner of the white envelope, half hidden under the doormat. For a moment she simply stared at it. Something about its tired, yellowed edges and faded ink felt ancient, almost sacred. She bent down with slow, deliberate movement. When her fingers touched the envelope, a chill ran through her. The paper was worn, like it had traveled roads, hands, seasons, maybe even decades. She straightened up and held it under the lamp. The handwriting on the front was shaky, uneven, but familiar, terribly familiar. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled violently. This handwriting, she had only seen it once before, in a small birthday note folded behind a mango tree, left for her by a boy she once loved. Una. The name echoed inside her like a forgotten prayer. Her knees felt weak as she closed the door and slowly returned to her chair. The room suddenly felt too still, too fragile, as if time itself had paused to witness this moment. She set the envelope on her lap, unable to open it yet. 1,000 questions rose in her mind, colliding like waves against a cliff. Why now? Where had it come from? How long had it been traveling? Why did it reach her? Tonight of all nights. She examined the stamp, a foreign one from a country she had only heard about in passing. But the date on the postmark was the detail that made her entire body go cold. It was nearly 40 years old. Her lips parted in disbelief as tears welled up, heavier than any she had shed before. The letter had been written the same year Jonah vanished. It had been on its way to her all this time, lost in the world, forgotten by postal systems, drifting like a missing soul trying to find its home. She traced the faded ink gently with her thumb. Her heart pounded like a drum inside a hollow chest. This letter, this fragile, time-worn piece of paper, held the answer she had begged for every night of her life, the truth Jonah never got to deliver. Elise closed her eyes, holding the envelope tightly against her chest as a trembling whisper escaped her lips. Why did it take so long? She didn't know yet that once she opened it, her entire life story would shift, and the man she believed abandoned her would finally speak. For a long moment, Mama Elise simply stared at the envelope, afraid to open it, and even more afraid not to. Her entire life, 40 years of unanswered nights, silent tears, and a heart that never fully healed, rested inside this thin, trembling paper. With a deep breath, she slid her nail under the brittle flap and tore it open with the gentleness of someone handling a sacred relic. The paper inside was yellowed, the ink slightly smudged, as though the letter had cried its own tears during its long journey. She unfolded it slowly, her breath shaking, her eyes scanning the first line. Her heart stopped. My dearest Elise. Her hand flew to her mouth. No one had called her that in a lifetime. Not like that. Not with a tenderness that seemed to warm even the cold air around her. The room faded. All she could see were the words. Jonah's words. She read them with trembling eyes. If you are reading this, it means fate finally delivered what I could not. I owe you the truth, Elise. A truth I was too afraid to speak. Her heart pounded. She leaned closer, gripping the paper tight. The night I left, it wasn't because I stopped loving you. I left because I feared I would cost you your life. Her breath caught. Her fingers tightened. What was he saying? She continued reading, her eyes moving hungrily across the faded ink. There were men after me, dangerous men. I got involved in something I should never have touched. And when they threatened you, I knew I had to disappear. Elise's body went cold. All her life, she believed Jonah abandoned her. But here, in trembling handwriting, was a different truth. He left to protect her. Her throat tightened painfully. The letter went on. I thought I could outrun them and return to you in a week, a month at most. But things grew worse. Every step I took toward you put you at risk. So I did the only thing I knew. I walked into that storm and prayed it would hide me long enough to keep you safe. Tears streamed down her cheeks, falling onto the paper like tiny warm raindrops. So that was why he didn't look back. Not because he didn't love her, but because he did. Her heart shook as she read the final lines. You were my joy, Elise. My only light. Leaving you was the hardest thing I ever did. If this letter reaches you someday, please know. I never stopped loving you. Not even for a moment. Her vision blurred completely now. She clutched the letter to her heart as a sob escaped her. A raw, aching sound that came from the deepest place inside her soul. For 40 years, she carried a wound shaped like abandonment. But now, in her trembling hands, she held the truth. Jonah had loved her enough to sacrifice his entire life. The room felt different now. Lighter. As if the walls themselves exhaled. The storm of her past was finally breaking. But another storm, an emotional one, was rising inside her. Because this truth, though healing, came too late. Decades too late. Yet still, it was the truth she had waited her whole life to hear. Mama Elise sat perfectly still, the letter resting against her chest like a heartbeat that was not hers. The house was silent, but inside her, waves were crashing. 40 years of grief rising, breaking, and settling all at once. She wiped her tears slowly, smoothing out the fragile paper as if afraid it might crumble. Jonah's words echoed in her ears, soft but devastating. "I never stopped loving you." She closed her eyes, letting that truth sink into the deepest cracks of her heart. It warmed her, but it also broke her. Because now she knew the truth, but she would never know the ending. Was Jonah still alive somewhere? Did he ever try to come back again? Did he suffer? Did he survive? Did he die alone? Her heart throbbed painfully. She folded the letter gently and placed it beside Jonah's photograph. The two pieces of her past, one frozen in time, the other traveling across decades, finally sat together like a story reunited at last. With trembling steps, she walked to the old wooden trunk at the foot of her bed. Inside were blankets, old scarves, a few faded dresses, things she hadn't touched in years. She lifted them one by one until her fingers brushed against a small tin box wrapped in cloth. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside lay the only gift Jonah ever gave her, a tiny silver pendant shaped like a leaf. She remembered the moment he placed it around her neck, whispering, "Whenever you feel alone, hold this. I'll always find you." Her breath quivered. She hadn't worn it in decades. Now she lifted the pendant with trembling hands and pressed it gently against her lips. A soft sob escaped her, gentler than before, almost peaceful. She carried the pendant and the letter back to her chair. Moonlight spilled through the window, bathing her in a soft, pale glow. Outside, the night seemed to lean in closer, as if listening to the quiet unraveling of her story. She held the letter again and whispered aloud, "Jonah." Waited. "I waited my whole life." The room answered only with silence. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She only felt a deep, aching tenderness. The kind that comes when a truth arrives too late, yet still manages to heal. Her heart felt tired now, tired in a way she had never felt before. She leaned back in her chair, letting her eyelids grow heavier with each breath. A strange peace washed over her, soft and soothing, like warm water settling over tired bones. Her eyes drifted to the photograph one last time. Jonah's smile seemed warmer tonight, his eyes gentler, as if he finally came back, even if only through words carried by time. Elise whispered, her voice barely a breath, "Thank you for loving me." Her eyes fluttered closed. For a moment the room was silent. Then a soft breeze slipped through the window, brushing her cheek like a familiar hand. The letter lay open on her lap. The pendant rested over her heart. And Mama Elise, finally knowing the truth she waited a lifetime for, let out a long, peaceful exhale. A quiet ending. Not lonely, not broken, but complete. Because love had returned to her, even if it arrived on the last night of her life. Mama Elise sat in her chair, the pendant resting on her chest, the letter folded gently beside it. Outside, the first hints of dawn whispered through the curtains, brushing pale light across the room. Her breathing had slowed, but her heart still pulsed with the weight of 40 years of waiting, hope, and love finally revealed. Her mind wandered to the life she had built, a life that looked complete to everyone who knew her. Her children had called her strong, independent, resilient. But they had never known the quiet ache that lived in her chest, the ache born from loving someone she could never fully hold. She traced her fingers over Jonah's photograph once more, remembering the warmth of his hand, the way he had smiled at her beneath the mango tree, the promise that had been whispered and broken only by fate, not by choice. The letter had rewritten everything she thought she knew. And yet, tears came again. Slow, unstoppable, a river she had dammed for decades finally overflowing. They were not tears of regret or anger or sorrow. They were tears of understanding, of closure, Of love finally given a voice after 40 years of silence. She whispered softly as if speaking to the wind. I understand now. You loved me enough to leave to protect me, even if it cost your own happiness. Her chest tightened, not with pain, but with a fullness she had never allowed herself to feel before. Every secret she had carried, every lonely night, every hope that had withered in silence, all of it had led to this quiet revelation. Her fingers, still trembling, clutched the pendant once more. She could almost feel Jonah's hand on hers, warm and gentle, as if he had returned just to see her one last time. For 40 years she had dreamed of him, imagined him, prayed for him. And now, in the fragile words on that paper, she found the truth. A truth that wrapped around her like a soft embrace, like a promise finally kept. The tears kept falling, unrelenting, but they no longer carried the bitterness of waiting. They were the tears of a heart released, a soul finally allowed to rest. She let herself lean back fully in her chair, eyes closing as the sunlight grew stronger, spilling over the walls, the furniture, the photograph, the letter, and the pendant. In that quiet morning, Mama Elise's final tear fell. Her last tear of longing, her last tear of love, her last tear of sorrow. And as it slid down her cheek, she smiled softly, feeling lighter than she had in decades. The world outside continued its ordinary rhythm. Birds chirped, the wind rustled the trees, and the sun rose on another day. But inside that small wooden house, something extraordinary had happened. A lifetime of love, waiting, and sacrifice had finally found its voice, and Mama Elise had finally let it reach her. She exhaled one final time, a soft, almost imperceptible sigh that carried with it every hope, every loss, every heartache, and every love she had ever known. And as her eyes closed for the last time, the pendant over her heart caught the first golden rays of the sun, a gentle, lasting light on a love story that time itself could not erase. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the curtains, spilling pale gold across the floorboards of Mama Elise's quiet home. The world outside stirred awake, unaware of the momentous closure unfolding inside. For decades, Elise had carried a silent storm in her heart, 40 years of longing, unanswered questions, and love interrupted by fate. Now, in these early hours, that storm was finally still. Her breathing was calm, steady, and at peace. The pendant over her heart glimmered gently in the morning light, catching the sun's rays as if honoring the love it symbolized. The letter lay open on the table beside her, a fragile testament to Jonah's devotion, his sacrifice, his enduring love. In her final hours, Elise understood something she had never fully grasped, that love does not always arrive in time to prevent pain, but it never truly leaves the heart it touched. Outside her window, the village began to wake. Birds chirped softly, and the wind carried the scent of dew and earth into the small wooden home. The world moved forward as it always had, yet in this quiet room, time itself seemed to pause in reverence. Elise's life, full of both joy and sorrow, had been a tapestry woven with patience, resilience, and quiet love. And now, as her body rested, her soul seemed to lift toward the light, finally free from the weight of unanswered questions. She imagined Jonah in her mind, smiling at her the way he had under the mango tree so long ago. His eyes warm, full of apology and devotion. For 40 years she had imagined him, prayed for him, and even feared forgetting him. But now she understood that he had never left her heart. He had merely waited as she had, separated by time, circumstance, and the invisible hands of fate. Her children, far away, would later find her peacefully seated in her favorite chair, the photograph of Jonah beside her and the silver pendant still over her heart. They would see the tears, the evidence of a life marked by both struggle and unwavering love, and they would finally understand the quiet depths of the woman who had raised them with tenderness and resilience. Mama Elise's lips curved into a soft, contented smile. In the final golden rays of dawn, she whispered into the silence, "Thank you for loving me. Always." Her hand rested lightly on the photograph. The room was still, serene, and suffused with warmth. In this moment, all the years of waiting, all the nights of longing, all the unspoken words of love and loss were reconciled. Her life, though touched by pain, had reached its gentle, fulfilling conclusion. As the sunlight grew brighter, her chest rose and fell slowly one last time. Mama Elise passed away quietly, peacefully, with the knowledge that the love she had carried all her life had finally come home to her. Proof that some bonds are stronger than time, distance, and fate itself. The world outside continued as usual, unaware of the extraordinary peace that had been achieved within the walls of that small wooden home. But inside, in that quiet dawn, a life fully lived, a heart fully loved, and a soul finally at rest left a trace that would echo forever in the memories of those who knew her. The morning sun poured through the windows, spilling light over the small wooden house in warm, golden streams. Outside, life moved as usual. Children laughing, a dog barking, neighbors greeting each other. Inside, however, a quiet reverence settled over the room where Mama Elise had spent her final hours. Her children arrived, drawn by a neighbor's call and the absence of their mother's familiar voice. Their eyes filled with shock and sorrow as they stepped inside, taking in the serene figure of the woman who had nurtured them, guided them, and carried her own secret burdens with quiet dignity. On the table beside her, the silver pendant glimmered in the sunlight. And there, carefully placed next to Jonah's photograph, lay the yellowed envelope, still folded as she had left it. One of her children, her eldest daughter, Grace, noticed it first. "Mom, what's this?" she whispered, reaching toward the fragile paper. The others gathered around, curiosity mingling with grief. Grace carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the delicate letter. The words, faded but still legible, told a story none of them had ever known. Their mother's secret love, her heartbreak, her sacrifice, and, most astonishing of all, the truth about Jonah, the man she had waited for all her life, who had never stopped loving her and who had vanished to protect her. Tears streamed down their faces as they read. Each line revealed the depth of the woman they thought they knew, the extraordinary patience, love, and resilience that had shaped their lives. They realized for the first time that the mother who had raised them so lovingly had also lived a lifetime of quiet devotion and unimaginable sacrifice in the name of love. Grace held the photograph in her hands, tracing the familiar smile of a man she had never met. "So, this is why she never spoke of him," she whispered. Her younger brother nodded, wiping a tear from his cheek. She waited for him, all these years. The house felt full of a presence beyond words. It was as if Mama Elise herself had filled the space with the strength, tenderness, and love that had guided her family even while hiding the ache of her heart. They sat in silence, reading and rereading the letter, letting it settle into their souls. And with that understanding came a powerful lesson. Love is not always about possession or time, but about courage, sacrifice, and the depth of the heart's devotion. In the end, the family realized that their mother's life had been a testament to love itself, unseen, quiet, patient, and unyielding. The photograph, the letter, the pendant, they were more than relics. They were symbols of a life lived fully in the shadows of longing, yet radiant with the light of unwavering love. As they left the room, holding each other, they carried with them a renewed understanding of who Mama Elise truly was. A woman whose heart had loved fiercely, waited endlessly, and finally found peace. Her story, though private, would forever remain in their hearts, a reminder that some loves transcend time, and some truths, no matter how late, have the power to heal generations. And somewhere beyond the veil of life, Mama Elise's spirit smiled, knowing that after 40 years, her love had finally been understood, and her life fully honored.